And cut. There we go. So it's really about adding value to the community, being part of a core unit. I'm reading this and I'm like, this solves the Byzantine generals problem. This is amazing. We've seen hyperinflation in a lot of countries. And some of these countries have been forced to adopt Bitcoin. I'm sorry to break it to you guys. Ordinals are here to stay.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Decoded by Diverse. Today we have Mohamed Ezeldin, the head of Tokenomics for Animoca Brands. Thank you so much, Mohamed, for joining us, and thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, I've got you. Thank you for being. It's great to be here today.
It's so good to have you. It's good to see you again,
yes.
For one. We're Egyptian family, in case anyone was wondering. So yes, we'll dive right in. So I like to start this by finding out about you and your history and what brought you to Web3 and Animoca. So, Mohamed.
So, I studied mathematics at university because I have a love for problem solving. Graduated with first class honours, went into finance and thought,
Mashallah.
excellent, alhamdulillah. I thought, excellent, I'm going to retire by the time I'm 35. I quit in my second week.
No.
Yeah, I realised the ethos alignment wasn't there. Again, you mentioned we're both from Egyptian families, so it's really about adding value to the community, being part of a core unit. And I felt a lot of the underlying philosophies that I was raised with didn't exist. It was actually quite the polar opposite in finance. So I quit, didn't know what to do, so went back into education and did my master's. Finished, and I thought, well, I'm quite good at this education, maybe I should do a PhD, or I go study medicine. And my lecturer, my university tutor at the time, he was like, no, go into the real world. So I did go into the real world to study again, to become a teacher this time. I was like, what do I enjoy doing? I enjoy helping others, I enjoy teaching, I enjoy, again, problem solving. So I went into education. And I was in education for 10 years. But part way through my journey in education, as a high school teacher, teaching mathematics obviously in the UK, a friend sent me the Bitcoin white paper. And I read it and I was just like, this is amazing.
What year was this?
This was 2017. This was like over the summertime of 2017. I'm reading this and I'm like, this solves the Byzantine generals problem. This is amazing. Oh wait, there's ICOs. What's ICOs? Wait, £100 just turned into thousands of pounds. This looks amazing. Let me forget about Bitcoin for a minute and let me just start investing my money, which funnily enough, I was buying Bitcoin and Ethereum to invest in these ICOs.
Oh wow.
And I got richer and richer. And then I thought, cool, let me put in more money. And then the crash happened. And we had what we call the dead cat bounce, where prices slowly started to recover. I'm like, yes, we're going to the moon. like LFG, we're all going to make it. No. And it just, by summertime 2018, my portfolio was down like 93%. And it's just like, okay, that's more or less all of my money gone, finished. Why did I lose all of this money? There were scams, but then there were also projects that I'd invested in that from a Web 2 business aspect, they were still functional, but the token was down 99%. And I realized there was a lack of this thing called tokenomics in the space. So being a problem solver, being someone who's curious, I wanted to learn more. So I went down a tokenomics rabbit hole, probably mid 2018, and really started to delve deeper into the, how can I put it, the disparity between what we want a token to do and a token just being used as a fundraising mechanism with nothing else to control what happens there. I mean, in 2018 it was a pie chart. Fast forward to today, some people still think it's a pie chart, but it's a lot deeper than that. And I started developing different theories around token economies. Managed to, over DeFi summer, make back a lot of the losses that I incurred, so that was always good. But for me, then the narrative changed from chasing get rich quick money to actually there is a problem here that needs solving, and there doesn't seem to be many people who understand the depth of the problem that needs to be solved. Some people understand different layers of it, but that depth of understanding wasn't there, or at least and I don't think it still is there, but I think people are slowly understanding the importance of tokenomics more. Fast forward to 2021, early 2021, I had someone from Animoca reach out. We've seen your profile, we're interested in having a chat with you. I went through the interview process, ended up having a couple of conversations with Yat, in which part of it was skills, but for me the bigger part of the interview, once he just, okay, this guy has the knowledge and the skills that I needed, but it was, does he have the ethos? And that for me, I think it was a changing point for both of us, because it's like, for me, I was at a point in my life as well where I wanted a mentor, and I felt Yat would be an excellent mentor.
Oh wow.
I'm still waiting for that. So yeah, if you're watching,
I was like, after you're done with him, can I go next?
Oh no, wait your turn. I'm still in line. Yeah, I'm next. Okay. No, but all jokes aside, I think that when I heard him articulating, he could articulate what I was thinking in a way I never could, and I was like, he's amazing.
Yeah.
So when I was offered the job, I took it. But it was under the condition, as I was still teaching at the time, is I need to wait for the academic year to finish. And in the UK, that finishes in July. So soft start, but then in July, bang, all in. Excellent, you're in. At the time, I was Tokenomics lead. Who's in my team? No one. Here's a spreadsheet, an hour with Yat, a pat on the back, and off you go. And I was thrown in the deep end. And you can argue it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was given more or less a blank canvas of what tokenomics looks like. The first few projects, again, you guys know who you are. Thank you for your patience with me. So we'll do a shout out. So Azarus, Alex from Azarus and Chris from Community Gaming, the first two founders and projects that I really worked with, and they were the experiments, if you like. But fast forward 2.5 years since that point, and I have a team of 10 or 11 if you include myself. We're a multidiscipline team where I've got astrophysicist, macroeconomist, ex-consultants, or they're technically still consultants, degens, game economists, game designers. I've got a really mixed bag of amazing individuals and amazing skill sets, and that's really where the magic happens.
Okay. I think you've given me a lot to work with here, so I have to pick and choose. But so let's go into, so the tokenomics things aside, I think this is a really good place to start, because tokenomics is not something I've ever really discussed on Decoded. So this is quite interesting. I mean, for projects a lot of people who come in thinking that, like you said, it's a pie chart and it just has to equal to 100%. So what's the biggest piece of advice you could give, and what did you think would be, well, let's start with that first.
Well, so the biggest piece of advice would be different depending on the stakeholder. So if it's to investors, for example, it's yes, you want upside, and yes, in early stage investments you're taking a risk, but at the same time, if you take too much of the tokens, if it's a direct token investment, then you're not giving an opportunity for the ecosystem to thrive, because what we've seen historically is, as unlocks or token unlocks begin to happen, there is big sell pressure on the token.
Yeah.
And that tends to kill an ecosystem, because at that point the product isn't ready, the utility, one of the magic words in the space, isn't there yet, so there's no demand for the token, and we see the graph, and it's sort of it goes off towards zero, and every now and again there's a small spike, but that's about it.
They try to push up a bit, just to try to give you some of that positive vibe.
So that would be to investors, to stakeholders, as in to founders. There is that payoff space. What we've seen is a lot of founders will go for the short-term success, which is get the investment in, start building something, but we've just described why there are limitations around that model. But we've also seen the way investors are fundraising, the way stakeholders are fundraising has changed, where if you're fundraising from a good VC who's not necessarily after 100x in 6 months or something like that, and a lot of them exist, which we can argue is good or bad for the space later on, but it's a safe, so the investor will invest in equity and have a token warrant, and for the investors that's a great form of investment, because they have the safety of an equity investment, but also the exposure to the volatility of a token. And then the allocation of that token is a lot less than what it would have been if it was a direct token investment.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been suggesting a lot to people to always do the token warrants, especially when people are still building, because if you have no product yet, it's really difficult to get anyone to even take a look at it. So
I mean, it's a catch-22, and it's something I discuss with a lot of the founders that we work with internally. Is do you put the cart before the horse? Do you put the horse for where do you start? And it's different for each project. Some projects, they need a lot of capital to get to a point where it's MVP. Other projects can whip up an MVP in a couple of weeks and prove traction. It really varies. I don't think there is a single framework or cookie cutter approach that you can just be like, we found a solution, let's apply it to everything.
Yeah, no.
I don't think that exists yet.
I mean, I think you're right. It does vary, like, for, like, industry to industry. Like, with gaming, for example, you know them, Farcana. So we've been working with Farcana for some time. Their game is really good, right? Even I've played it now, and I've become a little bit addicted.
Amazing team. Amazing team.
Amazing team, yeah. So for them, for example, I think the way that they've done it as well has been brilliant. Have you had a look?
I have had a look at Farcana. So funnily enough, Farcana, we initially engaged with Farcana to look at giving them light token advisory and market making, and we liked what we saw so much that we actually invested in Farcana, and that they went from being an external project to being part of the portfolio.
Yeah.
So it's, in the same way you liked what you saw under the hood.
I mean,
we liked what we saw under the hood as well.
There's a lot of, I'll tell you a little bit more later, but there's a lot of people who liked what they saw under the hood. So, but that's still, I guess, still private. But we can talk about that a bit after. So now, tell me about, like, so you come from an educational background. You love education. You've been through it many times yourself. So now, under Animoca and TinyTap, you guys have created Open Campus.
Absolutely.
And that is a very incredible concept, and I love working with you guys. So I want to know, explain that process. Like, how did that come about?
So I think the idea of Open Campus actually came about, education, while I love education, also has a deep innate love for education. And then during my interview process, there was talk around education naturally, because that's what my background was. And we always knew there was going to be an education play. We just didn't know what that was. And then when the acquisition of TinyTap happened, it was just like, okay, we now have a sandbox, if you like, to try things. For those of you at home who don't know what TinyTap is, it's a Web 2 platform. It's top 10 on iOS and Play Store, and fundamentally it's teachers create content. TinyTap have a no-code solution. Teachers create content. It spits out this content in a gamified form, and then it's aimed for, like, your 4 to 12-year-olds. Kids go in and they're essentially playing a game, but they're learning while they're doing that. The revenue model is quite simple. Schools and parents pay a subscription fee, and then from the profit that's generated, there is a split based on an algorithm they have between the teacher and the platform. So that's the Web 2 business model, if you liked. So when we were exploring, well, what can we do from a tokenization aspect, not just let's launch a token, but from a genuine tokenization aspect that can add value, not just to the platform, to investors, but also to the educators. And we came up with a model called the publisher NFT. Now, we see NFTs mainly as JPEGs, but when you think of an NFT, I really want you to think of it as a digital container. And we can put anything we want inside this container. So we thought, excellent, what can we put inside the container in this context? And the business model I was referring to, it's around the revenue being generated from these courses that the teachers have created and obviously distributed on a TinyTap platform. So we took the revenue, or took 80% of the revenue, of the future revenue. We wrap that in a publisher NFT, and it's called a publisher because the person coming in to buy becomes a co-publisher. So if you think about music publishing, it's a very similar model. And we didn't really reinvent the wheel. In this case, we just took a model that existed in a different industry and made it work for us in a compliant manner. So we took 80% of the future royalties, wrapped it in a publisher NFT, and investors coming in, they invested in this publisher NFT. So this was November 2022. We sold 12. We raised just under $400,000 at the time. 50% of that went to the teachers, 50% went to the platform. But then the 50% that went to the teachers, obviously it varied based on the revenue that was generated. We had one elementary school teacher. She walked away with just over $36,000.
Wow.
That's more than her yearly salary. When we worked it out, it's 14 months of her salary in a single NFT drop. So when we talk about changing the game and providing value back to educators, we did that.
Yeah.
But what we also saw that there was an appetite for this, and as of now, we hear RWA being used, real world assets. How can we tokenize real world assets? Well, we've done that. Yeah. We've done it in a way that actually it's brought in a new level of, maybe funding isn't the right word, but a new level of interaction with digital assets and education in the same time. So we saw that worked, we saw there was an appetite, and we thought, excellent, let's build an education protocol. Or at least let's seed the idea of an education protocol. This was the tail end of 2022. We started doing, again, the tokenomics for that. in the beginning of 2023. We ended up listing on Binance, going on the launchpad of Binance, getting investment from Binance. And the reason why I reference Binance quite a lot is for projects looking to launch, Binance is the holy grail.
It is the holy
because
grail.
you get liquidity, you get user base.
You guys had what, $1 billion within the first 4 days?
Yeah, we had, up until meme token launched, we had the most BNB locked to get the EDU token. So it took a meme to be education, and I have a lot of respect for Ray and what he's done with meme token. But it's, I guess, back to the point, at the time, it was the most amount of BNB that had been staked for EDU. And really what that allowed us to do, or I guess I'll take a step back, the purpose of EDU token is multifaceted, but it's multifaceted over time based on the utility that comes out. As of now, it's a governance token. As things grow, and I'll talk about some of the things that we were able to do from listing from Binance in a moment. But what that enabled us to do is, having such a liquid asset, we were able to create two $10 million funds. The first one is the Global Educators Fund, and really that's a way to onboard teachers by saying, you want to create educational content, we'll give you a grant to create educational content. And we even have a distribution platform if that content makes sense to be distributed on the TinyTap website. But we also knew, I said education protocol, that's massive. We have a distribution platform. How do you go from here to an actual protocol? And it takes time. And it also takes, what we've spun out then was another $10 million fund, which we have called the Open Campus Accelerator. And the purpose of OCX is to onboard the next 100 edtech companies into Web3. So to leverage the different technologies that we have available at the protocol layer.
Okay, so you have your two funds.
Yes.
One that's solely focused on bringing more educators to start teaching on the platforms.
To start creating content.
Yes,
creating content.
Creating content to help like teach or whatever it may be.
Yes.
Through Open Campus.
Yep.
And then the other one is for other technology partners. Essentially, that could come in
100%, but a focus on edtech, so educational technology partners to come in, because again, if we're building an ecosystem, and for those that don't know, the ethos at Animoca Brands really is blue ocean ownership of your digital assets. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. How can we work together and have positive network effects to make a difference? If it's in gaming, if it's in education, doesn't make a difference, the vertical that we're in. So that made a lot more sense, as opposed to, excellent, we've launched on Binance, that's not the approach we took. It's how can we be proactive to use the momentum that we have.
Of course, because that's usually like the end goal. So if you hit that right away and you get that first, it's kind of, in terms of listings and exchanges and exposure, like there's not really much more that you can get from that. I
couldn't agree more, but for us it was the platform to be able to go on and do more in a quicker time scale. We're offering funding for the edtech companies coming in. That's from grants all the way up to debt equity financing. So if you have an edtech company and you're looking for some sort of funding, or you're looking at Web3 and blockchain thinking, is this for us, isn't it? Opencampus.xyz. I'm sorry for the show, but it needs to be done.
The link will be in the
description below. It's been my dream to be able to do that. I've done it now. Again. I can link in the description below. There we go. I can go home. I can start rapping now.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. So so you have so you talked about the accelerator. So also you guys have Open Campus Alliance.
Yes.
So this is an alliance of incredible partnerships, one of which I'm going to just highlight just because GEMS Education, based out of Dubai, one of the largest in the world private school, like holding companies, whatever they're called. They actually went to a GEMS school myself.
Did you?
Yeah,
explains a lot.
I'm joking. If only I had Open Campus ID by then, huh? So before I was thrown off, I was talking about the Open Campus Alliance.
Yes.
You guys have really big partnerships, a lot of ed tech companies, a lot of also schools, institutions, one of which is GEMS Education, which is based out of the UAE, one of the largest in the world for private education, and the biggest in the region. So I want to know about other educational institutions. How can they become a part of the Open Campus Alliance, and what does that mean for them, their students? Like, how much access do they have? And I know this is going to come into the OCID, but
Absolutely.
you can kind of like direct us through it.
So I think we can start with the OCID. So the purpose of the OCID is a decentralized identity, and fundamentally one of the biggest problems we're seeing is reputation. And reputation has many different layers, specific from an education standpoint. And you can go on LinkedIn and you can see someone's graduated from Oxford, from MIT, but how do you actually know? You don't. So with OCID, you're able to actually have records of
like
proof. And it's not just university level, it's proof that maybe I'm in grade 1 and I've shown that I've understood algebra at that level, so I have a badge that's then synced to my OCID. That's one application. If I'm a content creator on Twitter, for example, or X as it's called now, maybe I can prove that the content that I'm generating is actually meaningful based on the interactions with it, that I can then upgrade my status on OCID. So it has multiple different functionalities depending on the user or the persona that's leveraging it. If I'm a teacher, for example, and I'm moderating content or I'm creating content, then that will be mapped into the OCID as well. Again, it's still early stages, but it's how can we begin to build reputation on chain in a way that makes sense. One of the projects that came through Open Campus Accelerator in the very first cohort, Skiza, Ngugi is the name of the founder, great guy, and he's based in Africa, and a big problem in Africa is how do you prove that anyone's understood anything? Like, where's the certification? At a primary school level, in places where maybe there's a village and there's a school and that's it. How do you prove this child has learned what they have learned? And OCID can begin to solve problems like that. So we're still at the beginning of that journey as opposed to the end. But then we talk about schools and how can schools begin to onboard into OCID and some of the other technologies. I think the issue of education, or the biggest challenge in education, it's one of the oldest institutions alongside finance. And for you to make change, it cannot be based on theory. It has to be based on application and data proving that this has a tangible, or has made a tangible difference. So you mentioned GEMS, and it's if we, let's in an example, we roll this out with GEMS and it proves successful, where now I understand I have more meaningful data points on the student. And it's also the life cycle, because we think we stop education when we leave school or university. We don't. That's the wrong mindset to have. We never stop learning, but how can we capture the learning that continually happens throughout our life? And let's be honest, a lot of our life is spent online. So having that Open Campus ID, just capturing the work that's been done, the learning that's been done, maybe not in a conventional sense that I'm on like a Udemy or a TinyTap or something like that, and I've finished this course and now I have a badge that's on chain. It's a lot deeper than that, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you guys have so there's a plan now so that everyone basically can have like their name.edu.
Yeah.
And that essentially is their ID.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yes.
And does anyone have access to see, like, can I just randomly go and see yours? Or?
So as of now, we did the alpha, if you like, with 1,000 signups just to
test it out.
To test it out and to reward the early community. Again, my name is Mohamed, so how many Mohamed.edus can there be? There can only be one, for example. So if you have a common name, you were able to claim that name early on. I actually need to check with the team if I did manage to claim that or not. I don't remember.
What about just Mo? That's also I think more common.
Yeah, I think we're blocking out probably up to 3 or 4 letters to begin with.
Okay.
Or maybe that was Mochaverse. I need to double check. I think that was Mochaverse.
Got a lot going
because
on.
we've had 100,000 downloads on the Mocha ID.
Yeah.
But I guess to bring it back to Open Campus, we want the ID to be at a point where it's ready, and the team have been doing amazing work on that. So again, shout out to Jay and Lama. They're not doxed, so I need to be very careful with making sure they're not doxed on the work that they've been doing. Because they're working on the product side of things, and it's
for a second I thought you were like Jake's. I was like, Jake's
no.
Oopsie.
Jake is doxed, and Jake's doing an amazing job on the marketing.
Well
by
done,
the way.
Jake. We really appreciate it. Love working with you.
Yeah, no, I mean the Open Campus team in general is an amazing team, and I work with
It
so
is.
many different teams internally and externally. And I probably shouldn't say this on air, but I love working with the Open Campus team. It's like
I mean, it's a
there's a
pretty
good,
good team.
it is a good team. There's a good malleability there. Everyone wants to add value because it is education. So there is that common goal that everyone is pushing towards. No ideas are shut down. Everything is done in quite a growth mindset perspective and how we can add value to make something work
Yeah.
because of the underlying meaning of what Open Campus stands for. So
That's
just shout out to the team. Thank you guys so
Yes.
much. And then a shout out as well to Catherine, has been an immense help on Open Campus from the beginning, from before we'd even penned it in as Open Campus. So there's been a lot of thought leadership happening around the ecosystem with TinyTap and Animoca to begin with, but it's grown since then. And again, you mentioned the number of the different partners earlier. Gems playing a big role early days as well.
Yeah, I mean, the partnerships alone, like, have been quite, for me, it's shocking to see, because it's like, it's such a big list of so many big, like, also big brands. So it's kind of, it's just quite impressive, because obviously I haven't seen it before. I'm just seeing it for the first time in the internal documents, and I was like, well, this is incredible to see also. It just kind of also shows that, yes, as much as, you know, a lot of people can hate against Web3, it is something that even the most traditional industry styled companies are now being like, okay, this is really how it's going to be.
It's, if we strip away all the jargon, all of what the back end looks like, do these solutions solve a problem?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. It's as simple as that. I think like one of the biggest challenges we have in the space is we sell the back end, we sell the technology. This is EVM compatible. This is proof of stake. This is proof of authority. Except again, all of these lovely terms. But when we look at front end applications and someone, I don't know, uses Instagram, they don't say it's built in JavaScript or this is built in C++.
Yeah.
No one cares. We use ChatGPT and OpenAI, and no one understands how the large language modules work on the back end. They just understand that if I'm good at the prompt engineering, I can actually treat this as a tool in a very good way where it can add value to me. So when we think about education, games, other aspects as well, it's how can we create front-end applications or solutions without necessarily selling the tech, but selling the solution itself. And if people want to look deeper into the tech, they're more than welcome to. And they can understand that this is blockchain technology, this is why we know that the data on there is secure, etc., etc., etc. That this is why, I guess we haven't really touched on the governance side of things, but what blockchain technology allowed is something that what we call liquid democracy, as opposed to I have to wait to go to the ballot. I have a list of people and I vote, for example, and there's such a big there's just people are disenfranchised with politics right now, because two-party politics have polarized society, where either it's given us Brexit, it's given us Trump, but again, these are just a few examples where if it's just a yes or no vote, it doesn't work because society is so complex. So what does governance look like as well? And these are other problems or other challenges, as we like to phrase it, that we're working on as well. But it's also putting the power back in the hands of the community.
Yeah.
And this is where the OCID also comes in. It's that if I'm a teacher, then I should have more governance over things that impact the ecosystem from a teacher's perspective. Maybe that's moderation of content. Maybe that's assessment, whatever that looks like. If I'm an investor and I understand the investment side of things, maybe I should have more of a reputation on things that impact the way the business is run, for example, obviously in a decentralized way. But in the current framework, we're using token weighted voting, which is one token, one vote. So there's no reputation. It's just the more tokens I hold, the bigger my voice is. And what we've seen is that the biggest token holders aren't necessarily the people who have the best knowledge in the decisions that need to be made. And it turns into a popularity contest more than this person knows what they're talking about. No, this person has hundreds of thousands of followers, so I'm going to vote for whatever they're proposing. As opposed to, we've checked this person's credentials. They've come from X, Y, and Z background, and that makes sense for whatever position they're going for, or a proposal that's been put forward. And we know that the people voting actually understand what they're voting on. So we're not there yet, but that's what a reputation system like the OCID can begin to enable us to do. And if you think of it from like DAOs, you then have sub-DAOs slowly starting to pop up. And we said humans are complex. I don't have to belong to one sub-DAO, for example. I can be across many different sub-DAOs and have a reputation that's quite equivalent across all the sub-DAOs. Or I might be really prominent in one where I have one of the biggest voices or one of the highest voting powers in one.
Yeah.
Because that's where I spend most of my time and that's where most of my experience is. But then across the other sub-DAOs, I have a much, much smaller voice because I haven't shown to have added value or I have the experience to make decisions. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Why would I vote on something to do with the legal side of things? Or, again, I'm a mathematician, so I'm a problem solver, tokenomics, so I can vote on that stuff and I should have higher voting power.
Yeah.
But why should I be voting on things that I don't have the experience in? Doesn't make sense. But how do you tie that? How do you tie in reputation when we're in a system that has no reputation as of now? So it takes time for that to be built in. So OCID, again, it's another step in that direction.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because we see it a lot now where everyone's like, oh, well, you can, with the way that this DAO is modeled, you can actually, you know, choose to let someone else vote for you. Yep. And then, you know, based on, you know, their expertise. But then how is that proven expertise? Like, how can you prove that that's actually, I can go on and say I'm actually PhD from Harvard, put on my LinkedIn because who's going to stop me? And then go and say, I'm going to make all of these decisions for you.
I know a guy who knows a guy who can get you the certificate to prove it as well.
No way. We'll talk. No one follow me on LinkedIn for a while. I'm going to be going to school. No, so it's a good point to bring. I mean, to talk about the relationship between tokenomics and communities. Yep. I think that's also not such a common thing to compare, but for the communities in that relationship, do you think it's really important for that ecosystem, for an ecosystem?
100%. Again, I spoke about ownership of data, and in Web2 we don't own our data. Very simple. Any platform I use, the platform owns that data. If I'm in gaming and I'm buying in-game assets, I don't own that data. I'm renting those assets from that platform. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be, again, education around what ownership actually means for people to understand the value of these assets, not necessarily value in a monetary sense, but the actual value of that data. But bringing it back to Web3 again, I have my OCID, for example, and I've showcased that I understand mathematics, I understand tokenomics, so then that's my reputation in those areas there, and I'll have the digital assets to prove that, maybe via badges or whatever that looks like. But then there's also fungible tokens, and what the fungible tokens allow you to do is then to exercise a vote, or they might be used as a medium of exchange within the ecosystem, or I might be able to stake to get services. It really then depends on what part of the ecosystem I'm interacting with. But what it also does, it gives you a sense of pseudo ownership of that ecosystem because I have a voice and because my voice can be heard. And that's really where the digital assets and the ownership aspect comes in, is that you're empowered to do something about it. Because as you're adding value to the ecosystem, the value that you hold increases, and then you're rewarded in addition to that as well. So it creates a positive virtuous cycle that can grow over time as the ecosystem grows as well. But the key to it is having the right mindset. And I talk about mindset a lot because I feel mindset underpins everything that we do. Yeah. And especially around education, a lot of the right mindsets are there to begin with, because it's how can we make the world a better place. But it's not just how do you make it a better place. Let's, I don't know, support Greta Thunberg with all of the stuff she's doing, or let's put a blockade here, or let's make sure that oil refinery isn't built, or let's create a more equitable system where we can actually pay people the right wage they should be paid. There's so many different ways to make a difference, but you have to start somewhere. Yeah. And for us, it's the power needs to be decentralized. But caveat, we are using token weighted voting for now because that reputation isn't at a point where we can shift from the existing means. And the other thing, we talk about governance as well. It's very easy to say quadratic voting, or we can start talking about all of these complex governance models that would provide more value.
Yeah.
But the fact is, a lot of people will switch off because it just becomes too complex.
It's too technical.
It's too technical. And
Yeah.
people understand, I have a list of names on a ballot, I vote for a name, done. I have a binary decision, I vote yes or no, or abstain. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And again, there needs to be an education over time on how governance changes.
And I think that plus like the AI, because eventually when you can plug in the AI, it will actually tell you out of all of the list of people who are, you know, volunteering to you know, answer these questions or take these votes, who's the most eligible. And then this is where obviously AI can give them ratings.
Absolutely. I mean, again, what we're starting with is something simple enough, but you need a strong foundation to start with, and then you can start to build and play around with different with different tools like AI, with different ways to weight the scorings, with maybe within sub-DAOs different governance models, because it doesn't have to be the same governance model within each sub-DAO. So it might be, I don't know, if it's here are 10, we spoke about the Global Educators Fund, for example, so that could be a sub-DAO within itself, and it might be, we need an educational piece of content to teach English to girls in Nigeria aged between 8 and 9 years old, for example. And then you have 10 content creators have created one lesson each. How do you vote? So we might use quadratic voting in that instance, where it's not a one vote, and there might be 4 lessons there that you think these lessons are all really good, but I have a single vote. It becomes very difficult. Quadratic voting will allow you to then start to allocate your vote in a way. And I guess to take a step back, quadratic voting, the quadratic function is essentially when you square a number, when you multiply it by itself. So you'd be given, let's say, 100 credits. I'll probably use a much easier example. That there's a group of us.
Throwing math on me now.
Sorry. No, because it's.
I have to go. I need a calculator.
We'll make it easier. We're going out. It's a group of friends going out for dinner. You can go to your McDonald's. You can go for steak, burger and lobster. A couple of other options. You might be a McDonald's Maxi. We have 100 credits each. You're a McDonald's Maxi, so you'd allocate 10 of your credits to McDonald's. But because of the quadratic nature, 10 times 10 is 100. So you've allocated all of your credits to McDonald's. I might be someone who is irrelevant. Let's say there's 4 options and they're irrelevant. So I'd allocate 5 to each one, because I don't mind where we go. 5 squared or 5 times 5 is 25. So I'd be allocating 25 to each. And then at the end, you see the sum total and you see which one comes out on top. It might be the group is full of McDonald's Maxis, so we end up going to McDonald's. It could be the case that there's a split, and then what do we do if there's a tiebreaker?
Yeah.
But applying the same concept, and instead of what restaurant we want to go to eat at, maybe what educational content do we want to fund? Which content creator, which teacher do we want to fund? That's not live, but it's an option, or it's an idea of how we can leverage a different governance mechanic within a sub-DAO setting where it makes sense.
I mean, I feel like that would give a much fairer sort of that would, I think in terms of being able to also split your vote, that I feel like that also makes it a lot better, because some people, if you're just having the one, people can just throw it on any name. Like, this name sounds cool, Mohamed. I'll do it. Mohamed Ezeldin.
Exactly. I'm not complaining.
I hate that name. I'll just stick to Mohamed. So, and then you also don't get so many options. At the moment, I feel like people just do the polls that I've seen, like, not to anyone specific, but I've seen like very, like, I just feel like they're forced, like you're trying to force like some sort of communication or engagement or involvement from the community.
It's because it's such a small space as of now, and I mean, the main voting technology people use is Snapshot, which is off-chain, but you can still see on the Snapshot page who's voted for who. So if you know that there's a big influencer on a specific DAO, and you've shown that you support them, but because they can see the way you voted, you now have to vote for them, even if you don't necessarily believe with what they've done.
Yeah, because there's no anonymity.
There isn't. And
I feel like that gives people not that they shouldn't already be very honest, but I feel like when there's no anonymity and people are seeing where you vote, it can really affect your decision because of the surroundings.
The game theory is completely different. Like, if you're doing something when you're not being observed, versus when you're doing something when you're
Yes.
being observed. It's like I've studied it in wave theory, or just in waves, and it's insane because a wave can act like a sound function, but can also act like light, just depending on how you're observing that function. And it's a representation of humans, because it's like, I don't know, if I dropped $100 and you don't know me and you've seen me drop it, but someone's seen you see me drop it, you're more likely to give it back because you know you're being observed,
I'd be
regardless
like, split it.
regardless if you're a good person or not. Like,
Yeah.
but if someone doesn't see you, then you're more. I don't remember the numbers,
I always would
but
make I'd actually think about it for a second. I'd be like, karma. Excuse me.
But there we go. Other people, if they're not being observed, they'll be like, "Thank you very much. I'm $100 richer for this," and it's just because someone was observed or wasn't observed. So the game theory changes completely.
That's true, though.
So it's super interesting, and again, that's another rabbit hole we can dive down, but
I know.
maybe another day.
Maybe another time. I want to get your take on what you see for the market in the next, let's say, the next 12 months.
I think date of recording December 2023.
Yes.
Bitcoin's above 40k, Ethereum's above 2k. The Bitcoin ETFs are supposedly around the corner, and what that means is a hell of a lot of institutional money. What we've seen over the past 4 months is maybe the total market cap go from just over $1 trillion to approximately $1.5 trillion, so an increase by 50%. And that's just based off of retail money by the looks of it. So what happens when the institutional money comes in? I'll leave that for everyone at home to decide. But personally,
Wow.
and this is not financial advice, I genuinely think in the next bull run, Bitcoin surpasses 6 figures for sure. Like, I think it will surpass 6 figures, and if it doesn't, we can edit this out before the end of before the end of 2023. It's not looking likely because we have 2 weeks left, but that was my thesis from the beginning of the year. Seeing the bull. I mean, is the bull back? I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know. I think what we're seeing is a lot of reaction to some positive sentiment externally. I also don't think we saw the depth of the bear. This didn't feel like a bear market. Honestly, it didn't. I mean, there were aspects there, but in terms of the innovation that was happening, there was so much innovation happening from that aspect. Obviously, there was a lot of projects that died as well.
Yes.
But if we look at a lot of projects due to really good marketing, and we had the ICO, and we spoke about 2017, 2018. Fast forward to the most recent run, it was the NFT run, it was the GameFi run. You had PFP was a narrative, and you had projects dropping a 10k PFP collection, raising millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And these were people who had, for example, never run businesses. And it's a generalization, so it's not entirely true. But in general, there were people who had raised millions and millions of dollars who had never run businesses, were sitting on all of this capital in an underlying currency that wasn't a stable. And then once we saw a pullback, and the pullback happened from Terra Luna, we cannot forget that. And then FTX. So we had a couple of black swan events in the space of 4-5 months of each other.
Yeah.
And it really killed crypto. Like, it really killed all of the positive sentiment that was there. And it wasn't just retail that were affected this time. It's the VCs were affected. Projects were affected because they had their treasuries on FTX. Obviously, we now know the outcome of that. But it's, I guess, what was the point I was making? It's a lot of projects have died because they didn't have the know-how. They didn't convert, for example, part of their treasury into a stable. So when ETH went down by 60-70%, when Sol went down by 90%, when AVAX, a few of the others underlying L1s, where some of these NFT launches had happened, they were sitting on $4 or $5 million, and then all of a sudden they're down 80%, and they're not sitting on 4, they're sitting on 6 figures as opposed to 7 or 8 figures, just by the deficit that's happened in the underlying token price. So I think some of it was just poor management as well. Others were founders were quite sensitive with their capital. But a lot of the time, and this is my second cycle through, what we see with founders is, and I've gone completely off topic, I know, but it's the founders who are actually building something. They don't go for the marketing. They go for product first. They go for, let's prove a theory out. And normally by the time they're at a stage where they can raise, it's in the bear market.
Yeah.
But that's also a good thing, because it's only the best will survive. Again,
For them, they just also keep building.
This is it. And it's there's a good team when they've been like, all right, we've been self-funded for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Or we just took some angel funding.
Been bootstrapped.
Exactly, we've been bootstrapping. This is where we're at. So there isn't a right or wrong way to do it, because again, it's the cart and the horse. What do I go for, the funding and then build? Do I start building and then I go for funding? It really depends. Like we spoke about with Open Campus, that we had a proof of concept that enabled us to list and raise and go through the whole Binance aspect, which then gave us the liquidity to be able to have funds to kickstart the ecosystem or take the ecosystem to the next level. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to be a hypocrite, but it does really vary from that aspect. So with that in mind, back to the question, predictions over the next 12 months. If this is the beginning of a bull run, and we do see a bull run, definitely Bitcoin over six figures. If it's not, and it's just the remnants of...
What about the halving? The halving's in April, so...
I mean, I think, was it 92% of Bitcoin would have been mined by then? So the halving will have an impact. It won't have, in my opinion, as big an impact. I mean, it will have an impact on miners, because a lot of miners are in the red already, because the price of Bitcoin, if you believe what's out there, is being suppressed. So for them, they're actually already mining at a loss. Maybe not with Bitcoin at 40k, but when Bitcoin was below 35, 32k, they were mining at a loss. So from that aspect, the halving then makes it twice more expensive for them to mine the same amount of Bitcoin. So will that have an impact? Probably. Will it have as big an impact? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Let's find out. I do feel that the halving has been a strong narrative. Let's see if that continues. I'm intrigued. It has. But I mean, we've got another 8% of Bitcoin approximately to be mined over the next 130, 150 years, something like that. That's not a lot of Bitcoin left to mine over a long period of time. I mean, 92% of Bitcoin has already been mined.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, that means there's not much value for someone to come in and start mining, unless you're an institutional miner, which is why we have the bigger institutional miners. But then Bitcoin has achieved a good level of decentralization already, but a lot of the big rewards have been paid out, versus maybe a newer ecosystem that might be a proof of work alternative. But then that's another story for another day. So halving, will it affect? Will it not affect? Let's find out.
What do you think for the next bull run? Let's say, provided that this is now us going into it, what do you think is going to be the newest trend? Do you think it's coming back to the gaming side or edutech?
I think gaming will be a narrative.
Yeah.
I think education is always a difficult narrative. It's more the case of it becomes a narrative once you've made it.
I feel like it is always there, but it's a very small portion.
I agree. I think it's as opposed to it being, I mean, it is a vertical within itself, but it's also a glue that binds everything else together. Mm-hmm. Because when you say halving, everyone understands what halving means. When we say tokenomics, we have different definitions of what tokenomics means. We might have an underlying similarity in those definitions, but there isn't a universal definition for that.
Right.
So the education layer is super important, but as a vertical, will it be a driver? I hope so. I really do. I think real world assets and infrastructure plays will be super important. I think security platforms as well, genuinely, which links in with the real world assets, because all of a sudden it's, for example, for me to buy and sell stock, it becomes very difficult to do it in a peer-to-peer way that's trustless. In the same way we can use cryptocurrencies, but can we leverage technology today? Of course we can. So what does that look like? But then do we want to do that? Because markets are open during certain times.
Yeah.
Whereas crypto is 24/7, and we've seen the state of some of us just from staring at the markets all the time. So is it something we want? Is it something we'll get? Two very different questions. But I think, real world assets / securities. Mm-hmm. I think GameFi is coming back with a vengeance. Before we didn't have playable games or fun games.
Yes.
We're coming back with fun games. We're also coming back with a much deeper understanding of what sustainability looks like.
Yeah.
Whereas before we were just like, guys, come over here, we're giving out crazy rewards. Everyone comes and starts playing to earn in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then the rewards finish and they miraculously disappear. I wonder why they've disappeared. And they go to the next knockoff of Axie or whatever it is, just to play. And it's just like, well, we know that doesn't work, but people are chasing money. Mm-hmm. Will that change in the next bull run? No. I don't think it will. But I also think there'll be a more sophisticated user type coming in. When we talk about having more front end applications where they're coming in, they're using it and they don't necessarily know this is an NFT on the back end. This is a fungible token.
I think those are the most successful ones, anyways, and I think those will be the ones that do the best. Also, one last question.
Go for it.
Ordinals.
Yes. Oh, I'm a massive fan of the innovation happening on Bitcoin.
Yes.
I know it's split the Bitcoin community in half, and your store of value laser-eyed Bitcoin maxis. I'm sorry to break it to you guys. It's Ordinals are here to stay. I think the other side of the Bitcoin community who have seen the innovation and the liquidity that's gone into Ethereum because of the innovation on Ethereum. And they're like, well, we want that for Bitcoin. Because as of now, Bitcoin is just a store of value. And the maxis will argue a store of value is enough. But for everyone else, it's just like, why can we not have the upside and the innovation underpinned by the security of Bitcoin? Bitcoin's never been hacked. Ethereum has been hacked. No one talks about it. Bitcoin hasn't been hacked. And what it also means from a macroeconomic perspective is we've seen hyperinflation in a lot of countries. And some of these countries have been forced to adopt Bitcoin, if it's Lebanon, if it's Venezuela, if it's El Salvador. So you already have users leveraging Bitcoin because they've been forced to leverage Bitcoin for various different reasons. And now you can give them that work, the element to be able to work for more Bitcoin, as opposed to a token on Ethereum or on any other chain. There's a lot of value in that. And I feel there's a lot of what we're calling locked liquidity in the Bitcoin ecosystem that hasn't been accessed yet. So I'm really excited by what's happening on the Bitcoin ecosystem. I think Ordinals or Ordinal Theory, BRC20s, Runes, we're starting to see what we saw on Ethereum in 2017 with the ICOs, with CryptoKitties, and it's the same feeling and excitement in and around the Bitcoin community right now.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited, and I think that's probably a really good place to end.
Yes.
Because Bitcoin is
Bitcoin
is king.
Bitcoin
is king.
Okay. Well, we can end it here. Is there anything else you'd like to share or anything like that?
Thank you for having me on the podcast. We spoke a lot about Open Campus. We touched on Bitcoin. So we are building on Bitcoin. We are building I don't know if the name's been released, but we're building what we're calling a digital life ecosystem. And so it's underpinned by Darewise, which is an Animoca Brands subsidiary.
Yes.
But what we've also seen is a big fracture in the Bitcoin ecosystem that I was referring to earlier. So this really is an ecosystem place. How can we bring in different technologies, different wallet providers, different destinations, so your metaverse or games, different toolings in an ecosystem where there is a value add to everyone there, similar to what we're doing with Open Campus, but this isn't around education. In the same way Open Campus is, it really is about your digital being, your digital life, and underpinned by a lot of different stakeholders that are there. So I'm super excited by that. There's a lot of excitement in the Bitcoin community around this, and it's really how can we innovate and how can we add value. And I think that's something Ben and the team are doing an amazing job. So big shout out there as well.
I'm going to be speaking to them soon on Decoded as well.
Really
so we can follow this perfectly.
Excellent.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mohamed, for being here.
Thanks for joining this episode of Decoded. I'm Mohamed Ezeldin. If you didn't know that already, I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Thank you guys. Over and out.
And then like,
comment, subscribe in the comments below. Hadouken!